It's time for the District 4 Report, presented to you by Professor Diggs himself, only on PowellPointBearcats.com. Class begins now.
Welcome to the District 4 3A Report. My name is Professor Matt Diggs, and by way of introduction, I am a DFW sports writer for theoldcoach.com, and what I typically do is I pick all the games in the North Texas area, and on Friday night, after all the games are through, I kind of walk through the results and how that implies and how that has implications on playoff games and how playoff matchups are kind of settling in. And typically I do this on Friday night about midnight. We call it the dump, and I really focus on 6A and 5A. So in talking with our friends at Pilot Point, they're like, hey, we got to get some 4-3A, some love here. Lots of interesting storylines. Obviously, the state champion came from Region 1 last year in 3A. So getting that information out there was important to Pilot Point. They talked to me. They said, hey, let's get District 4 3A. Let's break it down like you do to the dump every week. And I said, well, just give me a place and a time. I would love to do that. And they've given me this platform to talk about District 4 3A and how it kind of implicates into Region 1. And they've said I can say whatever I want. And when you give me that carte blanche, you know I'm going to take it up. So we're going to look at District 4 3A a little bit. And week by week, we're going to kind of talk about who we're expecting to make the playoffs. If anything happens to make it a non-clean district, we'll talk about the implications. And what I mean by a clean district is typically when you have an 8-team district, many times you'll have a champion go 7-0. You'll have a team go 0-7. Your second place team will have 1 loss, 2 losses for third place, 3 losses for fourth place, and so on and so forth. As you probably remember last year, District 4 3A, it was not very clean. We had some tiebreakers, a lot of chaos at the end, and that very well may happen with this lineup of quality teams this year. But so far, I feel like the results are pointing more toward a clean district than a non-clean district. But I think we have some debate about who will be second, who will be third, who will be fourth. But I don't think there's much debate on who's going to be first. And that team is Brock. And Brock is dominating at a level that some people argued maybe we wouldn't see relative to their new coaching staff and turnover, but a solid win, 68-6 over Bowie last week. And obviously, Brock is the machine. They are rolling. They are the Parker County champions, doing very well, and they go to 1-0, just popping out eye-popping numbers. Have scored 187 points this year, only given up 28 points in 4 games, so they're only giving up about a touchdown a game. They are kind of the big dogs, but obviously the reigning and returning big dog in Region 1 is Jim Ned, who won the state championship last year in that overtime thriller against Hollettsville. And one of the things I do on the dump every week is I kind of have a virtual contest between Jim Ned and Brock, who is doing well and how I see that kind of playing out. Jim Ned is obviously 5-0. They're going to have their bye week this week. But last week, a little unexpected. They beat Snyder, which is a solid win, but only won that game by about 8 points. I think we expected a more 3 to 4 touchdown win from a team like Jim Ned. So that will do one of two things. It will either kind of give Jim Ned a little bit of a push. Hey, we got to get better. Gives them something to work on going into the bye week, because I think most people would agree they're probably 3 to 8 touchdowns better than everybody in 3-3A in their district. But it might also kind of signal that, hey, maybe this is Brock's region to win. Now, do not worry, District 4-3A fans. There are quite a bit of storylines to consider, because if you remember the UIL bracket, Jim Ned and Brock are slated to play in the 3rd round. So whoever is second and third place actually has a better run if they can get out of that first round against a team like Early and against Wall, and they have a chance to make it to the regional final. In fact, we may see a rematch of the game for second and third place in the 3rd round of the playoffs on the other half of the bracket. So these district games become very important and have a lot of weight that we're looking at as it relates to here in October and as it might relate to late November, early December. So one thing I found interesting in looking at the scores this week in District 4 3A is you got Brock, obviously won by 62 points, just absolutely destroyed Bowie. But you look at the other three teams, and the other three teams who won, we expect to make the playoffs as of right now. You had Pilot Point, Whitesboro, and Paradise, and all won the games in very similar ways. Pilot Point beat Peaster by 18, 31 to 13. Whitesboro beat Ponder by 16, 34 to 18, and Paradise beat Boyd 38 to 19. So you had these kind of 4 or 5 touchdown scores against 2 3 touchdown scores. All the scores were kind of similar, so that kind of lets us know that those three teams are pretty even, and they're going to be battling out, and they're significantly 2 to 3 touchdowns better than that bottom tier. So I think that that's why we're not going to see that kind of calibration, because the team I think is the fifth place team in this district, Peaster, is about that 2 to 3 touchdowns away from Pilot Point. Now, obviously, with injuries and with anything could happen. Maybe a fourth place team like Paradise gets knocked off by Peaster. That's probably one of the games we're really going to be watching. Obviously, Pilot Point and Whitesboro. Pilot Point has a receipt to cash after Whitesboro beat Pilot Point last year. So a lot of things that we're looking at. But Pilot Point did that 31 to 13 win without Ish, and to me, that's an impressive thing when you can have a freshman step in, get 100 yards, and fit seamlessly into that. And obviously, Pilot Point, without one of their best players, just continues to roll and has one of their best games, because Pilot Point has been a team we've been a little bit worried about. Obviously, going 1-2 in non-district, the game out in East Texas against DeKalb, a little bit worrisome. I know there are some mitigating circumstances in that game and in that scenario out in East Texas. But obviously, you got to go west, you got to go east, depending on your playoff run. Obviously, Region 1, you'll be going west. So traveling and home cooking and things like that are things that Pilot Point are going to have to deal with in the playoffs. So I think that might be a good game to help get them ready for playoffs. But you like to see them win that game. But the games that matter are in district, and they did get that first win of the year against Peaster. Now, Whitesboro, nice win over Ponder, and I really think the big game that we're looking for in District 4-3A is that Pilot Point versus Whitesboro game. But kind of interestingly enough, if you kind of consider the calibration in District 3, you're going to have the first place team in District 3. They play the fourth place team in District 4, which I would consider right now to be Jim Ned against either Paradise or maybe a Peaster team that's really getting better. Peaster 3-1, Pilot Point put the first loss on the year on Peaster. I think they'll be a huge underdog in that first round. But the second and third place games, Early and Wall, those are very interchangeable right now. And I think right now Pilot Point and Whitesboro are kind of interchangeable as second and third place. So kind of watching those teams, how is it going to be? Is it going to be a team like Early against Pilot Point? Is it going to be Early against Whitesboro? Is it going to be Wall against Pilot Point? Wall against Whitesboro? And I think right now, those are what I consider 50-50 games. That right now, the way the season is kind of playing out, you can flip a coin and either of those two teams will play. So what I'm looking for is progression in district. And I think Pilot Point has the biggest area to grow and to improve, and hopefully maybe by the end of the year they'll be 1 to 2 touchdown favorites over Early or a team like Wall instead of a 50-50 game. Obviously, Pilot Point knows how to win in the playoffs. We've seen that the last couple of years with the Bearcats. Now, Whitesboro, again, similar to Pilot Point, they're looking at getting better and improving and peaking in that playoff uh, realm. But ultimately, at the end of the day, Paradise, I have them slotted in as the fourth place team. They had a nice win against Boyd. Wins matter right now, but again, when they play Peaster, will Peaster have what we saw against Pilot Point, a little bit of inexperience, or will they have kind of their coming out party, obviously a new high school, against a team like Paradise? Paradise undefeated, so their confidence, even though they haven't really played the toughest opponents in the world, their confidence is really high right now, and they're going to continue to grow on that. But this week they do take on Brock, so that's kind of that confidence wake up call. Will that score look more like the Brock versus Bowie score, or will that kind of maybe be closer to what the other three scores were this past week? Obviously, with Pilot Point, they take on Bowie. We know that Pilot Point will be a big favorite in that game. Even with or without Ish, I hear from my sources that Ish should be back this week, but I think that Pilot Point will be a big favorite coming up. And then the big game, Ponder versus Peaster. This is kind of what I consider for fifth place. If Peaster, the winner of this game will be that team that has a chance to knock off Paradise for the fourth spot. In fact, this is the only game in this district that I would consider a one-score game. Everything else I would be picking by 4 or 5 touchdowns. And then you've got Bowie and you've got Bowie and Boyd playing each other, and I think, or you've actually got Pilot Point and Bowie playing, and you got Whitesboro and Boyd. Whitesboro, big favorite over Boyd. Boyd hasn't won a game this year, so that's kind of what I'm looking at in District 4 3A. 3A is just about everybody's off this week except for Wall. Wall has a big game against Shiner, so that'll kind of give us a little insight into a team like Wall. How will they play against higher level opponents, which either if they play Whitesboro or they play Pilot Point, those are those higher level opponents. So that's kind of my look at District 4 3A going forward and going in and back. And next week we'll kind of look ahead. We'll kind of see how District 3A is looking as it relates to District 4 3A. I don't think District 4 3A, unless there's a big upset, is going to have much to talk about, but we'll see how next week goes, and we'll talk about the matchups next week in District 4 3A. So this has been the District 4 3A Insider. I'm Matt Diggs. Please follow me along on Twitter. I'm at Professor Diggs. Friday nights, Thursday nights are really where I have fun on Twitter, so follow along. Feel free to comment. I love criticism. If you think I've disrespected your team, feel free to let me know, because that's how I learn, and I get a chance to interact with very passionate fan bases, and I know 3A has some of the most passionate fan bases in football. So follow along on Twitter, and we will see you next week.